Hello, everyone. Dr. Glenna here. Today is Wednesday, February 18th. Thank you very much for joining me for today's happy hour. Again, my name is Dr. Glenna. I have a private practice in Torrance, California, where I am a licensed clinical social worker. I specialize in anxiety-based disorders and emotional abuse recovery. I basically help people kind of look at what are some things that happen to them and help them restructure their lives. Every Wednesday, I do the happy hour, which is completely free. Every Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. The happy hour is a 1 hour wellness webinar. This is where I'm going to teach you all types of different things, different psychodynamic concepts, big, chunky psychological concepts that we're just going to break down into sizable pieces. I'm very big on practical application. So I really hope that all of this information is something that you can immediately put into play one way or another. My disclaimer, number one, the happy hour is not to be used in lieu of any medical treatment. You don't get to say, I went to the happy hour, so I don't go to group therapy. I don't see my individual therapist. I don't take my medication. This is to be used for educational purposes that you can use in conjunction with the things that you're already doing. Also, if for any reason you're experiencing any mental health symptoms, please contact your primary care physician, a licensed clinician, or a psychiatrist. Okay. So we use the happy hour for information so that we can learn more things and we can put things into play immediately. And we use it in conjunction, but we do not use it in lieu of psychiatric services. Thank you very much for joining me again. Today is Wednesday, February 18th, and as soon as I can share my screen, there we go, the happy hour. We are going to talk about boundaries, emotional labor, and relational health. When doing too much is just too much. Boundaries, emotional labor, and relational health, the combination of all three and how all three kind of work together. And when doing too much, when it's just too much. My name is Dr. Glenna, and I like grocery store sushi. Like, I like fancy sushi, but I will run to Ralph's and get grocery store sushi in a heartbeat. If you don't know why I do that, every time this page comes up, it's the same thing, and I just feel like I have to share a random fact so that it's something other than my bio. Okay, the long and the short of it. Why do these three things even belong together? Why did I say, hey, we got to talk about these three areas? This is the long and the short of it. Relational health is shaped by how emotional labor is distributed and how boundaries are practiced. When emotional labor is uneven and boundaries are unclear, relationships become draining, resentful, and role-based rather than mutual. Okay. So these three things belong together. Two of these things are kind of the same. Two of these things actually flow and help the other form. The design of the emotional labor and the practice or not practice of boundaries is what will determine the overall relational health. Okay. So we have to have an understanding of all three in order to really understand how the three work together, because, of course, our ultimate goal is healthy, positive relational health. Let's get into some definitions. Boundaries, psychological and behavioral limits that protect emotional energy, time, and identity. Okay. Dr. Glenna's bootleg definition. Boundaries are the conditions at which people have access to you. Boundaries are the conditions at which people have access to you. What does that mean? Boundaries are intended to keep people in your life. Okay. If you are using boundaries to reject people or as building blocks to keep people out, you're not using boundaries that the way that they're intended to be used. As a matter of fact, you're actually not setting boundaries, you're actually setting barriers. What we want to do is we want to inform people of, again, the emotional, energetic, time, identity, material things, because we have boundaries around our physical material items that we own and that belong to us. We want to inform people how interacting with those areas keeps us feeling safe and secure. And we also want to inform people if the way that they are interacting with any of those areas of our lives makes us feel unsafe, threatened, uncomfortable. Okay. So when I say boundaries are the conditions at which a person has access to you, it means you can have access to my love under the condition that you treat me well respectfully, that you do not emotionally neglect me. You can have access to borrowing money from me under the condition that you return the money within the agreed upon amount of time. You can have access to visiting my home or visiting me in my home under the condition that you call before you come. You can have access to me as a person, to my intelligence, to my resources, to my home, my car, my family under these conditions. Okay. So we're not saying, well, I blocked them because I was setting a boundary. That's not setting a boundary. That's actually poor communication and poor conflict management. When we go straight to just cutting people out of our lives, and when we go straight to really building blocks so that we put a wall up that makes it really difficult for people to have access to us, that is not a boundary. That is a barrier. Okay. Boundaries are the conditions at which people have access to you because we desire these people in our lives. We have conversations with people that we value. We set boundaries with people and relationships that we value. We don't use boundaries as a form of punishment. That again is not a boundary, it is punishment. Well, I didn't like how you talked to me. So, I'm setting a boundary and I'm not coming to support you at your work event. That's not necessarily a boundary. That's punishment. That's retaliation. Okay. So there's a difference. That's not a boundary. But a boundary is a form of self-definition. And in order to set boundaries, you really do have to have a good understanding of who you are, who you're not, what makes you feel comfortable, what your triggers are. And remember, your triggers are your responsibility. Okay. We can't make the world stop, right? So the world is going to keep going, but you do have a responsibility to recognize what your triggers are and then do something to heal from your triggers. But at the same time, when you're talking to people, you do want to communicate what they are, and people that love you will honor them, to a certain degree. But your boundaries are a form of self-definition, and that you have to understand all of these aspects about yourself so that you can communicate what you're working through, what you're over, where you are, where you're not with another person. Boundaries are super important. A fun fact, people with poor boundaries tend to think people with good boundaries are just plain mean. People with poor boundaries, they will self-sacrifice at levels that are so uncomfortable. And they believe that everybody should self-sacrifice at this level. So when they come up against a person that says, you know what, I really want to support you, but I am physically and mentally exhausted. I need some time for myself, and then I can tap in with you. They see it as, oh my God, you're mean because you did not give all of yourself to me. Okay. So people with poor boundaries and people that struggle with boundaries, they tend to think that people with strong boundaries are just being mean. That's not the case. That's not the case. Okay. So boundaries, the psychological behavioral limits that protect emotional energy, time, and identity. And they are the conditions at which a person has access to you. They are very valuable and they are 100% your responsibility. Okay. You have to define your boundaries and then you have to communicate what your boundaries are to another person. Now, emotional labor. Emotional labor is the invisible work. This goes into managing other people's emotions, maintaining harmony, anticipating needs, monitoring reactions. The emotional labor is saying, I already know she's going to be upset about that. So let me do this to prevent that. Or let me do this so that when this happens, we can land and I will take care of it so that they don't have to feel the full weight of things. Oh, I see it's getting a little tense at dinner. Let me make everybody laugh so that I can ease the tension in the room. Let me do the emotional labor of monitoring who's upset. Okay, let me make a different meal for this person, or let me get this person off the phone a little bit faster because I can see that something is brewing over here. Okay, it is the work of maintaining harmony for everybody that is around you. This means being the mediator, right? You see your siblings arguing, you're like, okay, hey, come on, guys, no, like, okay, just relax. And they didn't really mean it like that. And you know how mom is, you know how she can be. Putting yourself in between other people so that you can try to mitigate tense circumstances and ease everyone's feelings. Being the planner, being the planner. If you are the person that plans all the meals, all the holidays, all the vacations, all the friend activities, if the only time you see your friends is when you plan the event, you are doing all of the emotional labor related to friendship. This goes into romantic relationships. If the only time you go on a date is when you suggest it and plan it and sometimes drive and pay for it, that could get exhausting. You have to conceptualize the idea of how you could spend time together and then go and find realistic places in the real world, do the planning of maybe making a reservation or finding out what time the place opens or closes or how much it costs to get in, and then making the time arrangements of we have to be there at 5:30, so I'm going to pick you up at 5 o'clock. All of that planning is emotional labor and it can get exhausted. And also, when you are the only emotionally aware one, when you look up and nobody seems to be aware of their emotions, you're the only person that has any idea of how you feel, of processing feelings, that can acknowledge something other than just being angry. Like, actually, I'm a bit irritated, or I feel rejected, or that didn't really feel comfortable. You seem to be the only person around that can acknowledge that they have any sort of feelings at all. That can also be terribly exhausting. Emotional labor becomes problematic when it is one-sided, when it is unacknowledged, and when it is expected rather than negotiated. If you are the only person keeping the peace, planning for everybody, anticipating everybody else's needs. Okay, I went to the store and I got picked up dinner for everybody, and I know you really like this, so I got your special thing. When it's one-sided, and nobody ever says, hey, I picked up something for you. I know that you really like those candy apples, and I caught one on sale and I got it for you. It becomes problematic when only one person is taking care of the emotional labor. That's when it's a problem. When you have two people or when you have a family system where everybody's chipping in, it's usually okay, right? It gets balanced out. Also, when it is unacknowledged, when you go through all the trouble, again, you've conceptualized the time that you guys can spend together. You found the place, you found the escape room, and you priced it and you found a time that was perfect for everybody to go, and everybody just shows up and it's like, I mean, I was okay. I don't really like escape rooms anyway. So you guys want to get something to eat? And nobody acknowledged the amount of effort that it took that went into planning this event or planning the meal or planning the trip. That is when it's problematic. And when it is expected, when everybody starts walking in the house and they're like, you haven't even planned dinner? Oh my, well, what are we going to do today? You haven't planned it. You haven't taken ownership over something that affects all of us. You haven't done it. And it gets expected rather than, hey, are you okay with taking care of this? You have the bandwidth to handle that. I know you have a lot on your plate. Okay. This is when it becomes problematic. Okay. So boundaries are a thing, emotional labor is a thing, and it's really a problem when it is not really appreciated. Relational health is a relational dynamic that is characterized by mutual responsibility, emotional reciprocity, clear communication, and respect for autonomy. So relational health is just like physical health, right? We can look at it and we can say, is it good, bad, healthy, toxic, right? And these are some of the indicators of relational health. For example, if you have healthy or good relational health, you probably have mutual responsibility. Again, you do a little bit of the housework, I do a little bit of the housework. Hey, I'm going to plan this trip, and no problem, I will plan the next trip. I was thinking about us going on a date we're going to go to brunch, in San Francisco. And then the next time it's like, you know what? I think we should go to dinner in San Diego, right? When it's mutual, when there's a mutual responsibility, we're probably looking at a healthy relationship. When sometimes there's 10 people in the group chat, and sometimes these three people plan an activity and these other people plan an activity. Mutual responsibility. We're probably having really good relational health. Emotional reciprocity, meaning if I show some vulnerability, you show some vulnerability. If I can show my emotions and how I feel, you show emotions and you show how you feel. It's not simply one-sided. It's not one person saying, God, I really love you. I think you're wonderful. And the other person is just like, yeah, that's great. There is emotional reciprocity. It's not just one person leaning in and really showing up for the other, and it's not being reciprocated. Clear communication. Okay, clear communication is, I'm really tired. Like I think I got to take a rain check. I know we're supposed to go to the wax museum, but I really got to take a rain check because I'm exhausted. But I'm thinking I'm free tomorrow. If we could have a rain check until tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Clear communication. Not passive aggressive, not ambiguous, not that kind of communication where you make the other person have to figure out how you're feeling and what's going on. But there's clear communication on both sides. So your partner or your friend or your coworker or mom, dad, sister, brother is clearly telling you how they feel, what they need, what's going on in their life, and vice versa. And respect for autonomy. There is a level of individuality within all relationships, right? No one person is an island, but we are also not designed to be conjoined at the hip with everybody. And if you feel like you have to talk to somebody, be around somebody every waking moment of the day, we have a whole different issue on our hands. Everyone has a certain level of autonomy. We all have things that we're interested in personally. I might like horseback riding and you're allergic to horses. And so you got to let me have my level of autonomy to do the things that I really enjoy doing. Those are just a few indicators of what healthy relational interactions look like. And in healthy relationships, there is an equal distribution of the emotional labor. That means one partner does not get to say, well, I pay for everything, so you handle the rest. That's not an equal distribution of emotional labor. Now, if you enjoy that dynamic, by all means, the only thing that makes it a problem is when you say I have a problem with it. So if you enjoy the dynamic, by all means. But in a typical healthy relational interaction, there is an equal distribution of emotional labor. There is equal distribution of decision making. It's not one person that just sits there and says, I don't know. Like I turn my brain off and I don't know. I need you to figure it out for me. I need you to figure it out. I don't know. There is an equal distribution. We all contribute according to our strengths. We all contribute according to what we're good at. And there is responsibility. It's not all on one person to keep everybody safe or to keep everybody fed or, to pay for every single thing. It's not all on one person. There is a separation of responsibility within the family dynamic, within the group dynamic, within the work dynamic. Okay. My lists are never exhaustive. If there's something that's not on my list, it doesn't mean that it doesn't count. It just means that it's not on this particular list. But these are some examples of indicators of solid emotional health. Signs of unequal emotional labor. One person is the planner, the mediator, and the emotional processor. Again, like I mentioned, one person plans everything. And I mean, plans everything for the house, plans what we're going to eat, plans what we're going to do for the holidays, coordinates with all the extended family to say, okay, we're going to go to Aunt Sue's house at 12 o'clock. And then, we're going to have dessert at Uncle Bob's house at 3. And then we got to drive across town while the other person just sits there and says, okay, that's not healthy. That is an unequal distribution of emotional labor. Or the mediator. Again, you are the person that inserts themselves into different situations to kind of like, okay, let me go in here, let me call such and such, let me see what's going on, let me calm everybody down. Or someone passed away, let me go in here and be everybody's therapist and kind of help mediate things to mitigate everybody's big feelings. And the emotional processor. Okay. People say, well, I'm just good at talking to people and I just know how to show up for people. And you have become the person that is responsible for processing everybody's emotions instead of making everybody else be accountable for their own feelings and their own experiences. When you feel responsible for other people's moods, if someone is upset, if they even appear to be sad, they have an attitude, they seem angry or irritable, you feel like it's your responsibility to somehow change what you're doing, impact their mood, because you can't tolerate them being uncomfortable and they don't have clear enough communication to tell you why they are uncomfortable. Another indicator of imbalanced emotional labor is difficulty relaxing because you are tracking everything. You're tracking everything. You're at the family event. Your partner is making dinner. Your kids are trying to, take care of something and you're just watch. Okay, hold on. Wait. No, but you need to do this. Well, what's going on in the kitchen? Like you taught your kids how to cook and they're in your adult kids are in the kitchen cooking Thanksgiving dinner, but okay, well how much of this did you put in? Well, I don't know. Just let me see. Well, don't use that pot. Don't move like that. You are tracking everything that is happening because you are so accustomed to being the person that is responsible for everybody's everything that you don't even know how to turn it over when somebody is trying to give you the opportunity to turn it over. So you have difficulty relaxing. You have resentment without clear conflict. You are just grumpy and a little bit irritated and resentful, and you can't even understand why. I don't even know why I feel like this. I'm just mad at everybody right now. I'll just get on my nerves. Move, leave me alone. You don't even have a firm reason for why you feel the way that you feel, but you feel a level of resentment. It just lives with you everywhere you go. And it seeps out through your pores, through conversations and snarky remarks. And, when someone says something sweet and positive, your response is snarky and it cuts people off at the knees because you are walking around carrying resentment everywhere you go, even when there is not a specific reason or a specific indicator that you should have some level of resentment. And if you are described as the strong one or the organized one, there probably is some unbalanced emotional labor. You probably are the person that is known for being really good at taking care of things, and other people have come to rely on you to take care of things. Okay. You've gotten to the point where you're like, okay, I got it. I got it. And then other people start saying, she got it. Let her do it. He'll take care of it. Don't even worry about it. And everybody gets comfortable just kind of laying back and relaxing and letting you do your thing. Meanwhile, you are overworked and resentful and utterly exhausted. And the emotional impact, the psychological impact, emotional exhaustion, just being completely emotionally exhausted, getting to the point where you hate everybody. You hate everybody. You hate everything. I don't want to go to the party. I don't want to do Thanksgiving. What are you going to do for your birthday? Nothing. I'm exhausted. I can't think. I can't plan another doggone thing. I am tired. And role entrapment. This is where you have what they call you girl boss too close to the sun. You've gotten so good at what you do that you are now known as the doer. And to try to even let it go, people are like, you have to make your pecan pie for Thanksgiving and your turducken and your green bean casserole. It's like, I'm tired. But you've gotten trapped in that role to where the idea of trying to even let it go is foreign to you or anybody else. And in that, you've probably crippled everybody around you to the point where nobody can even do the things that you do because you didn't train your successor. You didn't teach anybody how to do the things that you can do, or maybe like in your family system, in your relationship, you've gone so long with being the thinker and the brain and the planner that now nobody around you even knows how to plan a date or how to plan a trip or how to plan for the time off when the kids are off for Christmas time. And loss of spontaneity. It gets to the point where you are boxed in by the level of responsibility that you have allowed to get placed on you, whether you placed it on yourself or whether externally everybody kept placing it on you and you just kept accepting it. But it gets to the point where you can't even do anything spontaneous. You can't miss. You can't take a day off. You can't do a day trip at the drop of a hat. You can't say, I think I want to do, Christmas in Russia this year because you have boxed yourself so far into your role that it doesn't even leave room for spontaneity. There are too many people relying on you, or so you believe, too many people relying on you, no successor, no one can do what you do, and you're exhausted. And in our family systems, we tend to know people for certain things, right? We all play up to our strengths. And so typically the person where there is an imbalanced emotional labor, this person becomes the caretaker for everybody, for everybody. And they do it quietly and they don't complain about it. And it's like, Big Mama, she just loved taking care of all 15 of her grandkids. She loves cooking from scratch for everybody. And Big Mama is in the kitchen cussing everybody out because no, she don't like taking care of all 15 grandkids every single weekend. No, she doesn't. She's tired of making macaroni and cheese from scratch, actually, if you really want to know. But the role assignment in the family is you're a good fill in the blank. You're a good mom if you're the caretaker. You're the good dad. You're the auntie. You don't have any kids. Just take mine for the weekend. You're the good grandparent and you become the caretaker. And now the family dynamic understands you as when you need to be taken care of, go to that person. Even nobody's stopping to think if that person wants that role or how they feel in that role, but go to that person. And again, you also become the mediator. You gotta call Glenna. She knows how to fix things. Like you gotta call somebody else. You gotta call David, Chris. You gotta call such and such because they know how to get to the bottom of things. And you become the responsible one in the family system. This one is particularly dangerous because when you become the responsible one in your family system, you give everybody else permission to be irresponsible. When you become the family member that manages their money and their finances, so your bills are always paid and you always got a little something in your savings, you now give everybody else license to not have enough because they're going to go to the bank of you in order to get all of their things met. So when you become the responsible one, when your whole family knows you as the responsible one, it gets particularly dangerous because again, you give everybody else license to be irresponsible. And then we have the overfunctioning and underfunctioning dynamic where one person carries more responsibility while another person carries less. Okay. And that goes again, emotional labor, the taking care of the house, the maintenance of the house, the maintenance of the friendship. We have, again, if in your friend group, if the only time you see your friends, talk to your friends, spend time together is when you are overly responsible for maintaining connection and maintaining all of that, and the other person is carrying less, we have a very clear overfunctioning and underfunctioning dynamic. The other person is just coming along for the ride. And then we have it to where you have your internalized worth is equated to your utility. Your internalized worth, what you think you're worthy of, or what you believe makes you worthy, is directly tied to your usefulness. So, this is where we get into, and I won't go too far down this rabbit hole, but this is where we get into people that are typically emotionally unavailable and their expression of love being acts of service because I'm exhausted and I'm probably not really tapped in emotionally, but I'm just doing things. I'm going through the motions. And so it teaches all of us in the family system that a person who loves you does things for you. And so now they're not really connected to your heart. They're connected to your hand. They're connected to the amount of labor and work that you're willing to do for them. And in turn, we start to perpetuate the idea that the expression of love is done when you do something for me. And then it comes back to you like, dang, maybe I'm only worth something when I'm doing something. And the only way that anybody's going to see me or notice me is if I'm doing something for them. Okay. Now, this internal worth being tied to utility is absolutely an inside job. If I didn't mention it before, I am accepting new clients, and this is absolutely something that I would work on with my individual therapy clients. And self-worth becomes tied to being helpful, reliable, or emotionally available. Your belief is that I am expressing my emotion through my actions. Now, don't get me wrong, love is a verb. So you do express love in the way that you show up for the people around you, yes. But when it gets to the point where you only show love and affection and people only interact with you because of what you're doing for them, that's a different story. Okay. And again, what we're talking about is when things are imbalanced. Because if I express love and affection for you by saying, hey, have you eaten? I'm going to bring you some food because I know you had a long day. And then 2 days later, you express love and affection for me saying, hey, I know you're stuck in your office, so I sent you some lunch. It's balanced. That's not where the problem lies. The problem lies when it is imbalanced and one person starts to feel like I am only worthy or loved when I am actually doing something. And also the other thing that happens a lot in families is guilt is used as a regulator. So, I'm going to make you feel guilty if you even try to change this dynamic. But I need you. Like, I gotta go to work and I don't have anybody to take care of my kids. And so, like, how can you do this to me? When I start using guilt to regulate your behavior, we have a really toxic problem on our hands. Okay. I'm using guilt like, oh, but I don't have enough. I just need to borrow money just one more time. Like, I know you have a lot of money in your savings. Like, share it with me, even though I've disrespected all of your boundaries the whole way through. But yeah, share with me again. Guilt is used to control the person that mentally the whole family has assigned them this role. And guilt is used to keep them in this role so that when they start to try to break out of it or do something different, nobody's having it. Um, the response, emotional labor contributes to anxiety because who wouldn't feel anxious if you were just working for everybody, if you were just a workhorse? Clearly, burnout. Who would not feel burned out if your job was just to take care of everybody else and you weren't receiving anything on the other side. We all contribute, but you should also be receiving something from your relational interactions. Resentment. Resentment is when there is something that brings up some feelings and you just don't have the space to process it. It just turns into resentment. And loss of, oh, sorry, and emotional disconnection. Because if all I do is labor for you, I'm your brain all the time. We don't ever split this up. You always turn your brain off when I'm around. I do all the thinking, all the planning, all the organizing for you. I don't feel connected to you anymore. Now I feel like I work for you. And I don't feel particularly emotionally connected to you. And I'll probably have a loss of desire to connect with you because I don't see the benefit. If I lean in and I connect more with you, it actually equates to more work and more labor. So I have to do the work to lean in, and then I'm not getting anything in return. I'm just pouring out. That is exhausting. And then it also creates a parent-child dynamic. And so you hear about this in dating relationships where there's one person that's always planning and the other person is just sitting there receiving. You start to feel like the parent taking care of a child. And if you have children, I feel like if you have children and you know what it feels like to care for the health, well-being, and welfare of a child every single day, not when a child spends a night at your house, but being responsible for this child's entire life, right? From like, when do they start going to the dentist? And, do they have a jacket when it's cold? And did I put them in the right tutoring classes in middle school to set them up? You recognize how much thought and planning goes into the care of this child, and it's top down, right? Parent love is top down onto your child. When you're in a relationship that's like partnership or friendship where it's not top down, it should be mutual. Not always equal, but it should be mutual. When one person is giving and the other person is receiving, it becomes top down and it starts to feel like you are raising the eternal child. That's how you hear about people that say, I feel like my spouse was just another child in the house. I feel like I just had another kid to take care of. This person didn't help. They didn't contribute. I asked them to help. They gaslit me. They deflected. They just didn't show up for me. This dynamic where the emotional labor is heavily placed on the other person starts to bleed into where what should be a mutual relationship now feels like a parent-child relationship, which who would have a desire to connect physically or emotionally with that type of dynamic? And the role-based interaction, it's rather than mutuality. Like it's really like, okay, it's my job I gotta take care of this. I gotta, whatever, pay all the bills while this person just sits up and spends all the money. And your interaction now, you're tied to this person now becomes based on your role in their life rather than a mutual desire to have this person in your life. Okay. Like, oh, my friend is so irresponsible. I have to go out with her on Friday night because ain't no telling what she gonna do if she goes out without me. So now you're not necessarily going out because you enjoy hanging out with your friend. You're going out because your role is the responsible one. And you have to make sure that your friend gets home safe. And of course, all of that leads to a decrease in intimacy because all of that, it zaps your desire to want to be emotionally with people. So, how do these three connect? How do healthy relationships, boundaries, and emotional labor, how do they connect? A lack of boundaries moves to over functioning. If you don't set boundaries, one person takes on a disproportionate amount of emotional labor because boundaries are the conditions at which a person has access to you. If you are not aware enough to set healthy boundaries, people are getting access to you in ways that makes you exhausted and uncomfortable and makes you feel unsafe. And when that starts to happen, you will take on a disproportionate amount of emotional labor. Now you become the regulator, the planner, the stabilizer, and you experience emotional exhaustion and resentment. Lack of boundaries leads to over functioning. Chronic emotional labor leads to boundary erosion. Chronic emotional labor leads to boundary erosion. This is when someone is consistently responsible for the emotional tone, the conflict management, everyone's comfort. If somebody is constantly doing that, the boundaries start to wear. because we're just tired. You literally just worn the person down. So if you don't practice boundaries, you end up doing most of the emotional labor because you have not set the tone. You haven't set the standard for at what way people can have access to you. And so you just overfunction and you do way more than what you should do and you start to build resentment. And if you're constantly doing all of the emotional labor, your boundaries get eroded because you have positioned yourself as the person that will get it done. And you start to ignore, I don't like that. That makes me uncomfortable. I'm exhausted. I need some time to myself. I just need a minute to just come up for air. I've been working, working, working. I'm in school. I go to work. I raise kids. I have a partner. I have a business or I have a house that I'm trying to keep clean. But you keep allowing people to position you as the fixer, as the planner, and as the organizer, and your boundaries get eroded. People often stop recognizing their own limits. You feel guilty for setting boundaries. This is where it really gets tricky. You've done it for so long that you set the standard that you will do it. So when you try to set a boundary, it feels weird and foreign and it feels like, "Ugh, I'm doing something wrong. I can't do that to them. I can handle it. I'm strong. I can absorb it. I got it. I'm okay." And you confuse capacity with obligation. You think that just because you can do it, you're supposed to do it, and you've lost sight of what is really supposed to happen here. Boundaries create conditions for healthy relationships. Boundaries redistribute the emotional labor. Excuse me. Boundaries increase mutuality and they allow authentic connection rather than role performance. Okay. Boundaries don't damage relationship. They reveal where the relationship can function in a healthy way. Remember, boundaries are intended to keep people in your life. They are not the building blocks that we use to keep people out of your life. So it's like, hey, I love you, partner, but I really need you to take ownership over this, this, and this. I can't plan every single thing that we do, right? If you're upset, I can't read your mind. I need you to talk to me and tell me when you're upset. I will gladly comfort you, but I can't read your mind. And I'm not going to read your mind because that is exhausting. And for me to be responsible for the emotional labor of making sure that you're okay while you sit there with your arms folded, rolling your eyes, that is grossly imbalanced. We need to redistribute this. You get to be upset. You get to have big feelings, but I need you to go to your corner, roll your eyes in the corner, and figure out why you're rolling your eyes. Come back and talk to me so we can redistribute this emotional labor and this experience. Boundaries increase mutuality. Okay. When you clearly communicate your boundaries, the other person can show up and there could be more of a mutual interaction with other people. Like, hey, friends, I'm going to find the resort and I'm going to connect this to a travel agent, but somebody else needs to take care of what colors we're going to wear on each day of the trip. Okay. So here's the boundary. And here's now I'm giving other people an opportunity to make a mutual effort so this all doesn't fall on me. And just really quick, these patterns often originate in early relational environments, role rigidity becoming the responsible one. You learn very early on. Shout out to the oldest sisters and oldest brothers. Shout out to the oldest ones. Oftentimes, older siblings learn very early on to be the responsible one, and then it sticks. Okay. And then, of course, we have what I mentioned before, the overfunctioning and underfunctioning dynamic. And so, depending on your attachment style, sometimes we have a fear of disappointing other people and what that might mean. Okay. It's not solely, I'm scared of this person being disappointed. The other half of it is if I disappoint the other person, I might not have the social connections that I need in order to survive. I might not have access to a family system. I might not have access to a larger church environment or to friends on the playground if I disappoint this person. And of course, the internalized guilt around saying no. So, practical application, which is always my favorite part, practical application. I want you to ask yourself some questions on a consistent basis. This is not something that's going to get resolved immediately. Okay. This is something that you're going to have to start to take note of in your behavior and start to gradually, slowly make incremental changes towards a healthier version of you. Where am I doing emotional labor that is not acknowledged? Remember, emotional labor in and of itself isn't the problem. That's not the issue. Emotional labor that's not being acknowledged is going to breed resentment. So where am I doing emotional labor that is not acknowledged? In what place? Work, home, school, relationship, in with what people, in what situation? Am I planning everybody's birthday and nobody acknowledges it? What circumstance is this coming up in so we can start to identify, is there a pattern of behavior where you overfunction and allow everyone around you to underfunction? What emotions come up when I consider setting a boundary? With my clients, this happens often where we talk about setting boundaries and then they say, but I feel so, fill in the blank. I feel bad. I feel guilty. I feel remorse. I feel shameful. I feel like I did something wrong. I feel like I cheated the person. I feel like I let them down. What emotions come up when I consider setting a boundary? And one of the things that we do in one-on-one therapy is we work through experiencing that uncomfortable emotion and seeing, hey, if you work through that feeling, you'll come out on the other side. And you can live with the decision that you made because you're able to process through the feelings that come with the decision that you made. Do I feel responsible for other people's feelings? Sometimes we can say, no, I don't feel responsible for nobody else's feelings. But then in action, if someone looks like they might be upset, or if you think that they might be mad at you, or if you think that you've done something that made them sad or that, made them feel any way other than happy and elated, all of a sudden you feel like you need to alter your behavior. You feel like you need to do more, say less, be bigger, be smaller. That is an indicator that yes, you do feel responsible for other people's feelings. And we want to slowly adjust that. Okay. We do want to take accountability for our actions. We do recognize that our actions do impact how other people feel. So I'm not saying that you run around here being a complete individual, being a bull in a china shop, just being mean to everybody and not caring how people feel. That's not what I mean. But recognizing that people do have the ability to take ownership over their own experiences and it's not always on you. And what would emotional labor look like? What would it look like in different scenarios? What does it look like at work? What does it look like in a dating relationship? What does it look like in a friendship? What does it look like with adult siblings? It's easy when you're kids, mom, dad come in there and break it up, fine. But when you are adults and your sibling, you guys both have your own separate places, and you both got cell phones. What does it look like with the emotional labor with adult siblings? What emotional tasks do I do automatically? Now that we've kind of looked into it, like, oh, okay, I see how it kind of comes together. I've given a lot of different examples, and maybe you see yourself in some of these examples, so you can start to catch yourself. Oh, I do kind of, as soon as it gets a little tense, I do all of a sudden crack a joke. I do try to ease attention. I do try to take people's mind off of things. And I do feel like that's my responsibility. Like, oh, so what emotional tasks did I do automatically? And which of these are acknowledged? Which of these things that I do well are acknowledged? Because again, emotional labor in and of itself isn't the problem. But when it's not acknowledged over a long period of time, that's when it will start to build resentment and it'll start to be problematic. Which are expected but unspoken? Who expects me to be the strong one without saying, can you please come in and help? Who expects me to jump in? Who expects me to plan everything for everybody? Who expects me to run this whole house without saying, can you please run this whole house? Who expects it? And which specific activities are expected but not spoken? And what would shared emotional labor look like? Now, what it's going to look like is going to differ from one relationship to the next. What shared emotional labor looks like in a romantic relationship when you are dating is different than what emotional looks like when you are married, right? Those are two different levels of relationship. So if you're holding your dating relationship to a standard of marriage, we got to take a step back. We're not there yet. What does shared emotional labor look like with coworkers versus what does it look like with your best friend? Because it's going to differ. It's going to be more intense in certain situations. The expectation is going to be higher in different situations. We have a lower expectation for coworkers because they're coworkers. Some coworkers become friends and then they get thrown into a different category, but coworkers are coworkers. And then we want to look at small behavioral shifts. Nobody goes from 0 to 100. You don't. You go from 0 to 1. And then you go from 1 to 2, and then you go from 2 to 3. So the goal here is to recognize some of the behaviors that you have, some of the ways that you've been over functioning, learn how to set some boundaries, and we're going to do that by making small behavioral shifts. We're going to say no every now and again. And as people push back, we're going to get more and more comfortable with saying, I know I'm really good at it, but I'm exhausted and I just can't keep doing that. Small behavioral shifts that add up over time, and it creates an evolved version of yourself. It doesn't have to be like an immediate revolutionary way of doing things. And pause before stepping in to regulate others. This is going to be difficult, might be hard to even catch it. But when you see somebody else being upset, you're like, hold on a second. Let me not do anything. Let me let that person experience their feelings. Let me give that person an opportunity to soothe their self, and let me give that person an opportunity to communicate what they need from me. I might be doing more than what they need, and I might be putting gasoline on the fire. It might be better if I take a step back and pause before I jump in to regulate other people, especially when they have not asked you for it, and allow others to carry discomfort. Allow others to be uncomfortable for a period of time. They'll be all right. They'll be all right. They'll be fine. But she needs, and I don't know, and I can't stand when people are mad at me because it just irritates me and I just want to go fix it. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. Allow others to carry discomfort. They'll be all right. And then you spend your time working with yourself to say, how can I help myself calm down from the amount of discomfort that I am feeling? And name needs without over explaining. Again, boundaries are the conditions at which people have access to you. You have a responsibility to communicate those boundaries. You have to name them. You don't need to over explain. You don't need to beg. You don't need to really do a whole lot of justification of it, but you do need to name them. You need to name what your needs are. If being held means something to you, or just being closer, spending time with somebody, you have to name it. If they're not naturally and organically doing it, you have to name it. Especially if you've been the person that has been over functioning, you have given everybody the impression that you don't have any needs. And so we do have to go back and do a bit of retraining people to understand, yes, I am human. I am not a workhorse. And even horses need like their horseshoes changed and their manes combed. But nonetheless, I'm not a workhorse. I'm not a machine and I'm not a robot. I also have needs. I like surprises. I like people doing sweet things for me. I like people saying, hey, I did this because I thought about you. I like that just as much as the next person. But you do have to name it and you do have to articulate what your boundaries are. Okay, that is everything that I have for today. Again, my name is Dr. Glenna, and today has been the happy hour. I am going to stop my share. Oh, wait, no. This is where I always struggle. uh, there we go. There we go. Wait. There we go.